Hi, this is Andrew. Thanks for joining me. This video covers the basics of Cisco IOS and how it works. Really, this is just an operating system. It is the operating system that Cisco uses for their devices, routers, and switches. We're going to start out by just looking at a simple configuration or a switch, really, and just see how we access it. So from Packet Tracer, I just grabbed a switch. I was selecting network devices. I have a switch here, and that is 2960 24 port switch. It's called switch 2, and oops, I don't want to delete it. I could change the name, and this is just a label on it. This is like the sticker on a switch, and I can call it my switch. So we have a switch here, and now I want to access it. In the real world, you take a switch, and you can look at it, but you can't actually click on it and do any command line stuff without accessing it from a console cable. That's a light blue cable that plugs into the serial port on a computer on one end and the console port on the switch on the other end. So if I want to simulate that in Network Academy, I can now select an end device, grab a PC, drag it up here, and then I can go into the cable connections, and it's a light blue cable that goes to the back of the the back of the PC. RS-232 is serial port. There are adapters that will convert this to USB, but this is not that kind of cable that we're simulating right now. So then we go to the back of the switch and plug in the console port. Now we can actually configure it. I'll show you the two things and how similar they are. So in Network Academy, if I go to desktop, one of the pieces of software that they simulate is called a terminal. In the real world, I would be using PuTTY for this, but in this world, I'm actually just using this terminal software. So if I move it over here, I can start running commands, and I'm at a switch console. Now, because Packet Tracer is a simulation, what it also has is I can open up the switch, and I can look at the physical layout of the switch, and you can see the 24 ports. You can see the console port kind of listed here. There are no switches on here, so it's not like even on a router that's simulated in Packet Tracer. I can even hit the power button on it. But here, the main thing we can look at is the command line, and if you look at it, it is the same command line we see in from the terminal program that's running on the simulated PC. This is just kind of almost looking directly inside of the switch to see the commands in there. So even though it doesn't have a real world comparison that will be, that would be effective, we're going to just most of the time use the command line directly from here because it saves a little bit of clicking around to make it work. Just recognize it's not a real world situation. So when you connect to a switch, you are in what is called user exec mode. So this is what a basic user logging into the switch can do. And if I wanted to see what I can do, and I have a switch console, I can actually put in a question mark. And these are the only commands I can run from user exec mode. It's pretty limited, and there's a reason for that. You're not in a privileged mode. To get into a privileged mode, you run one of these commands, the one called enable. And that is turn on privileged commands. Privileged exec mode. So I can type enable and do a tab to complete. I'll show you a little bit more about that in a little bit. And now when I have the pound sign, I am in privileged exec mode. Frequently it's called enable mode, but from a Cisco perspective, you need to know the term privileged exec because they will ask questions where they reference that term privileged exec. In the real world, you'll also hear enable mode mentioned. So if I look at the commands I can run here, there are a lot more. So if I just scroll up a little bit, I ran that question mark and that shows me everything I can do. And I can go down and then it shows that there's more than can be displayed on a single screen. If I hit the enter command, you see where there's show right here, the enter command adds one more command or one more line of output. This shows up in a lot of places where we're looking at Cisco IOS to see results, and it's more than can be displayed on a screen. So the enter command adds one thing at a time. The space bar goes through the next page. And in this case, there wasn't much left in the page, so it just completed it and returned us to our prompt. Now, if I do that question mark again, and let's say I see the result or the output I want to see right here, and I don't want to space through the whole thing. If I hit any other key on the keyboard, it ends that output. And I'm back at my prompt. So far we've seen user exec mode and privilege exec mode. Now the next step is actually configuration, global configuration. If I want to configure everything, configure something that occurs on the entire switch, that's global configuration mode. The command is configure, and my choices are terminal, because I can configure from this terminal. So I do T, and now I am in global configuration mode. Now if I look, I'm going to have a different set of commands. Some of them are similar, some of them do different things even. If you remember back to the user exec mode, I had an enable command, and that was to move me into enable. Now when I'm in configuration mode, that enable command will modify passwords on the modify enable passwords. So there are multiple things that we can do in different places. Sometimes some things can only be done in one place. Just keep in mind, you need to be in the right place to do what you're trying to do. Sometimes that can be hard to remember. Now, if I hit the space bar, I'll see the rest of the output of the things that I can do right now. Now, one of the things that's really interesting and helpful is that question mark. And I just showed it to you, but it's so much more powerful than just what commands can I do. If I do the question mark again, one of those commands is clock, configure time of day clock. So let's say I want to change that. I can do clock, and in this, if I type a C, there are multiple commands that start with C. So it won't know what to do. I can do a question mark and list those commands. But if I do CL, at that point, that is the only command that will run or that will function. I can hit tab to complete, or I can just hit enter and it will run the command. The thing is, that's not enough. It's saying incomplete command. So what I can do is clock or CL, and I can say, what do I need to do next? So configure time zone. Okay, what time zone option? So I'm going to do time zone and tab complete and do a question mark. Word, name of the time zone. So now I can set the name of the time zone. I'll call it Eastern. I don't know if that's, well, let's see what happens next. Hours offset from UTC. So I'll do -5. And let's see, is there anything else it wants to do? I can do a minutes offset from UTC as well. And the CR is for carriage return. That means I can, at that point, hit enter and it will accept the command. So I just did that. Now, if I do the clock command from another place, I can type exit to back out of one of the menus. I can type N to back out all of the menus. So I'm going to exit, and that will put me back into enable mode, into privilege exec mode. And frequently you just hit enter a few times to kind of see where you are on the screen. So that's a common thing that I will do. So I'm in enable mode, and I'm going to look, and there's another clock command here, manage the system clock. So once again, I'm going to do clock, and this time I'll do tab complete, and there's more than one CL command. There's clear and there's clock. So I will do CLO, do a question mark, and that's the only command. I like to tab complete, especially when I'm trying to figure out what a command does or the exact syntax that it uses. So if I remember exactly how to type the clock command, I could type it out right now, but I don't remember exactly what it's looking for. So I'm going to say, what is it looking for next? And that space is very important because now it's saying, what does it want here? If I do enter, it's going to say incomplete command. So I do the up arrow, repeat the command, and I'm going to say, what is it? What can I do? Well, I can set the time and the date. So I will do that. And now I've set I've used the set command. Now I'll do another question mark, and it's asking for the current time. And I'm going to give it a time of 14:00:00. And now, what is it? What else is it looking for? It's saying, okay, what day of the month is it? Okay, I'm going to say it is, or I can do month of the year. It's letting me do either one. I'm going to start with day of the month. I'm going to say it's the 2nd, and then do a question mark. And now the only thing I can put in is the month of the year. And I'm going to wishfully think it is July, because that would be nice. But now it asks what year it is. So I'm going to put in 2021, and I've just set the clock. I hit enter. I could have then hit the question mark. And at that point, the only option is to hit the enter key, carriage return. So if I go through this and I enter something that is not valid, it's going to give me an error. So let's look at what that looks like. I do clock set, and I'm going to change the date to the 43rd and do a question mark, and it's already lost. It doesn't know what to do. I can do the 43rd of March, or I can repeat that previous command, July 2nd, and change that to July 42nd, and it's going to give me an error message. It doesn't know what the 42nd of July is, so it will only accept certain inputs. And if we look back to the earlier command where it said day of the month, it will accept 1 to 31. So if you try to put 42 in there, or 32, or any number that's outside of what it accepts, it just gives you an error message. The same goes for the clock. If I try to set a time that's not valid, month, and the year, the only valid dates this version of iOS that's running in this version of Packet Tracer accepts is 1993 to 2035. So at some point, these devices will have updated versions of iOS that will support further dates, assuming we make it past 2035. But that's really all there is there. So now, remember, hopping in and out, we start at the console. This is when we plug into the switch. And again, simulating that because we're actually at the command line on the switch. If I had a password, I would enter it. I would need to enter it here. We'll get into setting passwords later on, but there's no password here. So I'm in my switch configuration. I'm in user exec mode, I should say. And from here, these are the commands I can run. And I almost always want to then run enable. So now I'm in enable mode. Again, if there were passwords set, I would have to type the password. Now the next step is if I wanted to change the name, if I start typing host name, that's the command to change the name. If I try to type that here, it doesn't recognize it. It's not that the command is not valid, it's not valid for here. So if I look at host name, it's not listed here, but if I go into conft, and all I need is something that differentiates it from all other commands. Con doesn't work because there's also a connect command, but configure, conf, will tell it that that's the only command that can run at that point. Conft, I'm in configuration mode, and now if I'm looking for host name, that command is right here. Now I want to change my host name, so I'm going to do host name. And remember, when I typed this here, that's just a label on the switch. That's kind of like a sticker that I put on the physical switch with a name. Here, host name is actually whatever I want the name to be. And if I type my switch here, now it shows up right here as the host name. If I want to give it a more descriptive name, I can do host name and call it first floor red building. Now that's the name of my switch. You can put whatever you want as a name. There are obviously requirements for the name of the switch. It can't start with a number, can't have spaces. That's for another time to talk about. But that is generally how iOS works, and you're constantly moving around. You can even go in deeper than global configuration mode to configure specific ports or configure specific types of access for the switch. We'll look at that later on. But this is the general iOS process, is hopping in and out of different configuration modes. And now if I were to connect to the switch remotely, which we'll get into later on, just by connecting to it and logging into it, I would know what the name of the switch is, because that shows up every time you type a command. So that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching.